They say humiliation in public hits differently. I didn't understand that until the day my career was erased while I was still standing on stage, smiling through a presentation. That morning, everything was perfect, or at least it seemed so. The glass boardroom gleamed under fluorescent lights. My slides were loaded, clients seated, and my boss, Nathan, had just patted my shoulder with that plastic grin of his. Make me proud, Kira. I'd worked on this project for 4 months. Nights, weekends, birthdays missed, all leading up to this moment. The room was filled with executives from Archwell Industries, our biggest client, along with my team. Even Nathan's boss was watching remotely. 10 minutes into my presentation, the energy was right. The graphs hit the mark. Laughter broke out at my punchline about making data dance, and confidence swelled in my chest. That's when my phone buzzed. A single vibration, screen lighting up with a company-wide notification. Subject: restructuring announcement, immediate role changes. I ignored it at first. HR always loved their dramatic timing, but then the murmurs started. Subtle, like ripples through still water. My assistant's eyes widened at her phone, then darted to me, terrified. Everything okay? I whispered, trying to stay composed as I clicked to the next slide. She didn't answer, just swallowed hard. Then one of the clients, a kind older man named Henry, frowned. Kira, are you still with Bridgeline? The question hit like a punch. Sorry? I forced a laugh. He turned his screen toward me. My name was right there, on the HR bulletin. Position eliminated, senior strategy lead, effective immediately. I felt my stomach drop. My hands froze mid-gesture. The room's air changed, from warm confidence to cold, suffocating pity. Everyone saw it, every single person. Nathan wasn't even in the room. He'd left 10 minutes before the meeting started, claiming he had a conflict. He was probably sitting in his office, watching the fallout unfold. The clients looked at each other awkwardly. A few whispered about whether to continue. I could feel heat burning behind my eyes, my pulse hammering in my ears. I smiled anyway, the smile of a woman who refuses to give them a scene. Let's finish this presentation, shall we? And I did. Every slide, every word, every number. My voice trembled once, but I didn't break. When it ended, they applauded, softly, awkwardly, like people at a funeral who didn't know the deceased well. I packed my laptop, thanked them for their time, and walked out through the glass doors with what little pride I could carry. As I passed the reception desk, my keycard beeped red. Access revoked. HR was waiting in the lobby. We're so sorry, Kira, it's part of the restructuring. Effective immediately, I repeated, almost laughing. They nodded. You understand. Oh, I understood. I understood that my boss had planned this timing deliberately, to humiliate me in front of our biggest client. He wanted me erased in real time, turned into an example. But what he didn't know was that I wasn't the only one watching that presentation. There had been a remote observer on the client list, someone Nathan didn't notice. Victor Hale, the quiet investor behind Archwell's funding, a man with more power in one signature than Nathan had in his entire career. He'd asked to watch for performance evaluation. Nathan agreed, probably thinking it would make him look good. Victor saw everything. The presentation, the email. The moment I looked at my name and realized I was no longer employed, and that was where my revenge began. Because humiliation may end in silence, but silence, when planned correctly, becomes the sharpest kind of revenge. When you spend years inside the same walls, you start to believe the company pulse is your own heartbeat. For me, Bridgeline Strategies wasn't just a job, it was my creation. My proof that hard work could outrun politics. I joined 6 years ago as a junior analyst, buried in data sheets and invisible to the world. I was the kind of employee who built things quietly. People like Nathan, loud, charming, full of buzzwords, usually took the credit while people like me made them look smart. But that changed 2 years ago. I'd built a forecasting model that saved us millions. Clients started asking for me by name. Suddenly, Nathan's charisma didn't seem enough anymore. My success threatened his comfort, and I didn't see it coming. He began small. Casual dismissals in meetings. Kira, you're overcomplicating things. Then he took over presentations I designed. Let me handle this one. The client needs a confident face. And finally, subtle isolation, leaving me out of briefings, forgetting to CC me on vital chains. When I confronted him once, he smiled like I was a child asking why the sky was blue. You're brilliant, Kira, but you're not management material. You don't command rooms. I learned to swallow the insult. Until the day he asked me to take over Archwell's account. Archwell was our crown jewel, the account that could make or break the company's fiscal year. I poured everything into it. Every night I refined data sets, designed visuals, polished pitch language until dawn. That project became my life, and it worked. The initial results tripled expectations. The clients were ecstatic. I had emails of praise, referrals, glowing feedback. For the first time in years, I thought maybe, just maybe, Nathan would finally see me as more than a background player. He did, but not the way I hoped. One night, as I was finalizing a client deck, I saw Nathan's name in a shared folder I hadn't invited him to. He was copying my presentation files, titles, layouts, even the phrasing of my introduction. At the time, I brushed it off. Maybe he was just reviewing it. But now, looking back, I see it for what it was: rehearsal. He was rehearsing my downfall. The day before the presentation, he'd been oddly kind. "You're ready for tomorrow, right?" "I am." "Good, it's a big day. Let's make it count." And it did count, for him. After HR escorted me out that morning, I walked through the lobby one last time. The receptionist wouldn't look at me. Security pretended not to know my name. Everything felt sterile, rehearsed, like they'd all been briefed. Outside, I sat on the stone steps under the shadow of the Bridgeline logo, watching cars glide past. 6 years of loyalty ended in an email. I had no access, no title, no severance. Just humiliation. My phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. I saw what happened in that meeting. Vetch, my breath caught. VH, Victor Hale, the investor. We'd met once briefly during an offsite when Nathan introduced me as one of our analysts. Victor had shaken my hand, asked one question, and walked away. But I remembered how he'd looked at me, not like I was invisible. I replied cautiously, "I appreciate the message." "I'm okay," he responded almost instantly. "No, you're not, but you will be. Call me tomorrow." I didn't know it then, but that single text would change everything. That night I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I opened my laptop, disconnected from the company network, and backed up every personal document I'd ever worked on. Not stolen data, my own creations, the ones with my digital fingerprint all over them. Because deep down I knew something was coming. Nathan hadn't fired me for budget reasons. He'd fired me because the Archwell success was about to make someone famous, and he couldn't let that someone be me. He thought he'd cut me off cleanly. But he forgot that data has memory. Every file, every dashboard, every system I built, all logged access timestamps and authors. And every one of those pointed straight back to me. He thought he'd deleted me from the company's present, but he didn't realize I still owned its past. And soon, I'd own its future too. The first week after my termination felt unreal. I'd wake up at 6 out of habit, brew coffee and sit at my desk, only to stare at a login screen that no longer accepted my credentials. The silence of unemployment is a strange thing. It doesn't hit you like a storm. It seeps in quietly, reminding you every minute that you're no longer needed. Friends called. Some out of pity, some out of curiosity. "What really happened, Kira?" they'd ask, their voices soft with rehearsed sympathy. I didn't answer. I didn't have the right words yet. But one emotion was crystal clear: anger. Not the loud, chaotic kind. The kind that sharpens. The kind that listens. 3 days later, Victor Hale called. His voice was low, deliberate, the kind of tone people use when they're already 3 steps ahead. "I reviewed the meeting recording," he said. "Your work was impeccable. What your boss did was unacceptable." "Thank you," I replied, careful not to sound desperate. But I know how this goes. HR calls it restructuring. Everyone moves on. "Not everyone," he said. "Meet me." We met at a small cafe near the harbor, the kind of place where the sound of clinking cups covers quiet conversations. Victor arrived alone. No assistant, no entourage. Just a leather folder in his hand. He didn't waste time. "I suspect Nathan's been misrepresenting deliverables to the board." "Your presentation was part of that pattern. I need proof." I hesitated. "Proof? You designed the systems. You'd know where to look." That's when I realized Victor wasn't offering comfort. He was offering an opportunity. That night I opened my old backup drive. My fingers trembled as I browsed the archive. Every file I'd built, every dataset, every model, it was all there. And at the core of it, my master analytics hub. It wasn't just a collection of spreadsheets. It was a living system, interconnected databases, activity trackers, access logs, a web that recorded everything anyone touched, and Nathan had touched a lot. Over the next few nights, I pieced together the puzzle. He'd been repackaging my strategies under new project codes, presenting them as his own initiatives. The metadata told the story. Original author K. Lane. Modified by N. Coyle. Time of access, always after midnight. He hadn't even been subtle. But it was what I found next that stopped me cold in a hidden folder on our shared drive named Client Futures. Inside were proposals Nathan had sent to competitors using internal research. My research. Confidential data exported without clearance. That was corporate espionage. I sat back, hands shaking, the realization burning through me. He hadn't just humiliated me. He'd used my work to build an empire of lies, one he thought no one would question. The irony? The very systems he exploited were built by me, the person he fired. I called Victor again. I found what you're looking for. Good, he said. Send it to my secure channel. Don't copy anyone else. And Kira? Yes? Be patient. Justice takes choreography. For the next week, silence. Then an email from Victor's office. Upcoming board review, attendance required, Nathan Coyle, Strategy Division. Attached was the same presentation template I had designed. The title slide read, The Archwell Expansion Model. He was doing it again, pitching my work to the board. I laughed. It wasn't humor. It was disbelief. He hadn't learned a thing, but this time I wouldn't be the silent worker. Victor arranged it quietly. He invited me to the board review as a consultant. Observer. My name wasn't on the agenda, and Nathan had no idea I'd be there. The night before the presentation, and I barely slept. My anger had evolved into something colder, clarity. Every humiliation, every ignored contribution, every moment I'd been underestimated now had a purpose. I printed copies of my original deck, the metadata proof, and access logs. Each page carried a date, timestamp, and author trail. Facts, undeniable and precise. If Nathan wanted a show, I'd give him one. The next morning, I walked into Bridgeline's marble lobby. For the first time since that email had exiled me, heads turned. Conversations stopped. I didn't say a word. I just smiled. Because today, I wasn't there for a presentation. I was there for exposure. And when Nathan saw me sitting quietly in the back of that glass boardroom, his expression told me everything. He thought I'd come to beg. But I hadn't come for mercy. I'd come for reckoning. The boardroom was a cathedral of glass and ego. High ceilings, polished marble floors, and an air so sterile it could choke. Everyone who entered that room thought themselves untouchable. I used to think so too, until the day they deleted me with a single click. Now I was back, not as an employee, not as a ghost of the eliminated position, but as the silent variable no one accounted for. Nathan walked in first. Crisp navy suit, fake confidence radiating off him like cologne. He laughed too loudly at someone's joke, slapped a junior executive on the shoulder, and adjusted his tie in the reflection of the glass wall. I'd watched him perform this same routine countless times, only now I could see the cracks. He didn't notice me at first. My seat was at the far end, near the observers section. Victor sat 2 chairs away, flipping through a folder. Calm, unreadable. He didn't acknowledge me, and that was exactly the point. Nathan had no idea I was there by Victor's invitation. The meeting began. Slides projected onto the wall, lights dimmed. Nathan took the stage like he owned the oxygen in the room. Good morning, everyone. Today, I'm proud to present the Archwell Expansion Model, a breakthrough in predictive client engagement, and a cornerstone for Bridgeline's next phase. My model, my data, my language. Every word was a mirror of the deck I'd built weeks before being fired. He walked the board through his methodology, gesturing toward the charts I'd generated, the system I'd coded, the projections I'd calibrated. Each line of data was a fingerprint of mine, one he thought he'd scrubbed clean. For 30 minutes, I watched him spin his performance. The board nodded, impressed. They didn't know, not yet. Then Victor leaned back in his chair, almost casually. Nathan, excellent work. Quick question. Who was on your team for this project? Nathan smiled. I led the initiative personally. The data structure, analysis, modeling, all executed under my supervision. Victor tilted his head slightly. All of it? Absolutely. There was a beat of silence. Then Victor closed the folder in front of him. Slowly, the sound of paper meeting, leather echoed through the room. That's interesting, he said, because this document lists a different author entirely. Nathan froze. I'm sorry? Victor turned the folder toward him. On the printed metadata, author Kira Lane. Created March 22nd. Modified by N. Coyle, April 3rd, April 6th, April 9. The board members shifted in their seats. The silence became electric. Nathan laughed weakly. Oh, well, Kira was part of the earlier phase. I supervised the final version. Victor didn't blink. The earlier phase, being the phase you fired her during, a few heads snapped toward me. Nathan followed their gaze, and finally saw me sitting there. His eyes widened. For a moment he looked almost human, almost. Kira, he stammered. But what are you doing here? I smiled, slow and steady. Observing. The air turned heavy. One of the board members whispered something to another. The presentation screen behind Nathan flickered with my logo, the one I'd embedded in the prototype. Deck, subtle, hidden. A signature watermark, buried deep in the data visualization. My mark. And it had just appeared live on the screen for everyone to see. Nathan's face drained of color. He clicked frantically through slides, but the watermark appeared on each one, morphing slightly like a ghost that refused to be erased. Victor spoke again, his voice calm but slicing. It seems the original creator left a trace. Kira, would you care to explain? I stood, every eye in the room locked on me. The model you're seeing was built over 6 months, mostly after hours. It was designed to optimize multi-sector data flow, a system that could save Bridgeline millions. I authored, tested, and deployed it. Nathan accessed it later without my consent. The logs show repeated midnight entries from his account, copying, editing, and renaming the files. Murmurs filled the room. Nathan tried to recover. That's not true. These were collaborative assets. I cut him off gently. You mean the ones labeled Private Lane Prototype V3? The ones you emailed to competitors using your personal account? The room erupted. A few board members gasped. One stood up. Victor raised a hand, silencing them. His expression didn't change. We'll verify everything. But for now, Nathan, I think you've said enough. Nathan's voice cracked. Victor, wait. But Victor was already turning to me. Ms. Lane, would you be willing to assist the audit team in reviewing these materials? I nodded, with pleasure. Nathan's world collapsed in front of him. The man who humiliated me in public now stood stripped of authority, surrounded by the evidence of his deceit. Security arrived quietly, almost respectfully. They asked him to step out while the board continued the session. As he walked past me, our eyes met. There was no apology, no humility, only disbelief. He never imagined I'd come back. He thought power was permanent. He forgot that the ones they silence remember everything. And for the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I was undeniable. As the doors closed behind him, Victor spoke softly, not to Nathan, but to me. I think we've just witnessed an elimination. Only this time the right one. The room exhaled. I sat down, heart steady. For the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt since the day that email arrived. Control. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. Because justice wasn't enough for me anymore. I wanted him to understand what it felt like to lose everything he built, in front of everyone who once admired him, and that I decided would require a plan. When the board asked me to help with the audit, I didn't jump for joy. I kept my voice steady, my answers factual. Emotion is a luxury in rooms full of auditors and lawyers. Facts are currency, and I was suddenly very wealthy. I knew this was my moment, but not for revenge in the loud, chaotic sense. My version would be quiet, strategic, impossible to ignore. Nathan had built his success on manipulation, on making others look disposable. I wanted my retaliation to come through the same systems he'd used. Only now, those systems would expose him. The first step was documentation. I compiled every trace of his theft. Timestamps, internal access logs, unauthorized exports, and altered reports. The files told their own story. Who created what, when it was modified, and by whose login. It wasn't anger I presented to the auditors. It was evidence, clean and verifiable. They love patterns, and Nathan's pattern was clear. My work, downloaded after hours, renamed, and presented as his own. The second step was client awareness. I didn't want rumors. I wanted repercussions. With Victor's quiet approval, I drafted factual summaries for key clients, professional and precise, showing where their Nathan-developed solutions had originated. We called it contract transparency. Within days, clients began asking questions that Nathan couldn't deflect. One even paused renewal until the issue was resolved. Suddenly, the man who erased me had become the company's biggest liability. The third step was legal exposure. Nathan's exports had included confidential strategic data, not just my work, but client analytics. I provided the audit team with the files he'd sent to his personal email and, worse, to an external contact at a rival firm. That was no longer internal misconduct. It was a breach. Once legal saw that, the tone in the boardroom changed. The company didn't just owe me fairness, it owed me protection. The fourth step was people. I spoke with the interns, analysts, and assistants who'd been told to update my files after I left. I didn't push them to take sides. I simply asked what they'd seen. They shared chat logs, email threads, and version histories that showed Nathan's manipulation in real time. Their small confessions formed a chorus of truth that no one could mute. The final step was timing. I had one last piece, a set of emails. Nathan had forwarded from his personal account. Attaching a client proposal stamped with my initials in the metadata, I waited until the audit results and client backlash hit full stride before submitting them. That was the final blow. When the legal team opened those files, they didn't even look surprised. They looked relieved to have a clear conclusion. Nathan tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, but the narrative had already collapsed. He wasn't negotiating from power anymore. He was begging for leniency, and while I didn't smile or celebrate, I did feel a rare calm, the kind that comes when truth finally catches up to deception. My revenge plan worked because it wasn't about vengeance. It was about precision. I didn't ruin him, he did that himself. I just made sure every shadow he'd hidden in was lit by the facts he couldn't deny. The morning the legal team presented their findings, the boardroom felt like the floor of a courtroom. People shifted in their seats, as if the chairs themselves might collapse under the weight of what was about to be said. I sat near the back, hands folded, watching the faces I'd once passed in hallways now contort with the shock of truth. Outside counsel spoke in that steady, clinical tone that cuts deeper than shouting ever could. They outlined the evidence like an autopsy report. Timestamps, file transfers, metadata trails, and those damning forwarded emails. Each piece landed like a hammer on glass. Nathan, sitting at the head of the table, wore that familiar confident smirk, the one that used to silence entire rooms. But this time it twitched. He kept reaching for his water, his throat visibly tightening with every slide. When the auditors displayed the email chain showing him sending client data from his personal account, the silence was surgical. You could hear the air change. A board member coughed awkwardly. Another whispered something to legal counsel. Nathan tried to speak, something about strategic collaboration. But Victor cut in before he could breathe life into the lie. Collaboration doesn't involve stealing intellectual property, he said, voice calm but final, and it doesn't include erasing the people who built it. The Archwell client representative was next. He looked directly at the board, not Nathan. We were billed for proprietary insight, he said. Now I know it came from someone who no longer worked here. That's fraud. His tone was controlled, but every word was a verdict. The damage was no longer internal. It was financial, legal, public. Nathan's defenses crumbled one after another. He tried to blame oversight, junior staff, even me, claiming I had left gaps that forced him to step in. The auditors corrected him instantly, showing logs proving he'd accessed the data after I was locked out. The color drained from his face. He leaned back, eyes darting from one side of the room to the other, searching for allies that no longer existed. The board chair finally spoke. Her voice was sharp, deliberate. Mr. Hale, the evidence is clear. Your actions have compromised our client relationships and exposed this firm to serious legal risk. She paused. Effective immediately. You are relieved of your duties pending formal termination review. Nathan froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. For years, that voice commanded attention, dictated careers, silenced dissent. Now it failed him completely. Security was already waiting outside the door. When they approached, he turned toward me, not angry, not pleading, just stunned. For the first time, I saw recognition in his eyes. He finally understood who had built the foundation he'd stolen. As he walked out, his polished shoes echoed against the marble hallway, a sound that felt almost poetic. The same floors where he'd once paraded, victories that weren't his now carried, the weight of his downfall. The boardroom sat in heavy silence for a moment before Victor broke it. "We'll need to rebuild trust," he said. Then, turning to me, added quietly, "You started that today." I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I simply nodded, feeling the tightness in my chest begin to ease. I'd spent months living in the shadow of that man's ambition, but in that moment, the light shifted. The truth wasn't loud. It was calm, deliberate, and irreversible. That was the moment my story turned. Not when he fell, but when I stopped needing his downfall to feel whole again. When the meeting finally adjourned, the room emptied in uneasy silence. No one wanted to be the first to speak, not even to me. Some glanced my way, half ashamed, half curious, like they were seeing a ghost that had returned with a file full of receipts. I stood slowly, gathering the folder in front of me, careful not to let my hands tremble. Outside, the air in the hallway felt different. The same walls that had once whispered, with judgment now carried, the faint hum of vindication. Nathan's voice, once booming through these corridors, was gone, replaced by quiet, almost respectful stillness. The receptionist, who had avoided my eyes when I was escorted out months ago, looked up and gave me a small nod. It wasn't apology, it was acknowledgement. Victor caught up to me before the elevator doors closed. "You handled that perfectly," he said. "Clean, factual, professional. They couldn't twist a single word." I could hear the relief under his tone. The unspoken admission that he hadn't been sure how this would end. "You didn't just save your name," he added. "You saved theirs too." When the elevator opened to the lobby, I saw Nathan being led out by security. No cuffs, no scene, just quiet finality. He turned once, eyes hollow, not with anger but disbelief. I wondered if he finally understood that all the charm, the manipulation, the power plays, they only worked as long as no one was watching. And now everyone had watched. As he disappeared through the revolving doors, I felt something inside me settle. Not joy, not triumph, but peace. The kind of peace that comes when the truth no longer needs to be defended. That evening, I stayed late in the empty office, sitting by the window overlooking the city. I replayed the moment when the legal slides hit the screen, when the evidence burned through his denials, when the silence in that room became my justice. I had dreamed of shouting, of vindication through noise, but it hadn't come like that. My revenge had arrived quietly, precise, undeniable, permanent. I realized then that the real climax wasn't his downfall, it was my return. Standing in the same building that once erased me, now untouchable, unshakable, and fully seen. In the days that followed, the company became almost unrecognizable. Where gossip once traveled faster than truth, now people spoke in measured tones. Policies changed, email filters tightened, and the word transparency suddenly appeared in every internal memo. My reinstatement wasn't just about bringing me back. It was about rewriting the rules of what the company would tolerate. Victor offered me a new role, Director of Data Integrity. It wasn't just a title. It was a safeguard. I'd oversee audit trails, intellectual property compliance, and internal accountability systems. My first act was to design a watermark system that attached invisible creator IDs to every project. No one would ever lose their name the way I did. Some employees approached me quietly in the following weeks. Analysts, interns, even mid-level managers. "You gave us courage," one said. "We used to think silence was survival." I smiled. Not out of pride, but recognition. I had once believed that too. As for Nathan, his exit was swift and final. The company's public statement cited ethical violations and breach of trust. His career, once gilded with charm and fabricated brilliance, dissolved in the very silence he used to command. Last I heard, he tried to pitch consulting services to a smaller firm. But word travels fast in industries built on reputation. His downfall wasn't loud. It was lonely. When the dust finally settled, I returned to that same boardroom, standing before the glass wall that overlooked the city. The skyline shimmered in the evening haze, a reminder of how ambition could look so beautiful and still burn everything beneath it. I thought about the girl who'd once stood there, clutching her notes, unaware that her own creation would be stripped away mid-presentation. She had vanished for a while, but not forever. I didn't destroy Nathan. I simply let the truth breathe long enough to do what it always does. Correct the story. One night, long after everyone had gone, I walked through the empty office. The air was quiet, the lights dimmed to soft gold. On my old desk, I left a small note, not for anyone else, but for myself. Never let them make you invisible again. And that was it. No dramatic ending, no applause. Just balance restored, justice earned in silence, and a workplace reborn from the wreckage of deceit. Somewhere deep down, I realized the lesson was never about revenge at all. It was about identity, about what happens when you reclaim the power someone tried to take. Because revenge fades, but truth lingers. It echoes through halls, reshapes systems, and reminds every silent witness that someone once stood up and didn't back down. I took a final look at the skyline, the city lights flickering like quiet applause, and whispered under my breath, "They erased me once. Now my name's etched in every file they open. This is Revenge Untold, where betrayal meets justice, and every silence finds its voice." Don't forget to subscribe